Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March 18th, 2019 Salisbury City Council work session. We have several items on the agenda tonight, and we will begin with Tom Stevens is supposed to be here, but we have Bill Sterling instead. Bill, come on up. And
Yeah, Billy Lewis.
all right, Billy, come on up too. He's good. He needs support, I guess.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What I have before you this afternoon is a budget amendment requesting $145,000 to be applied to our street lighting account. Some background on that is the amount that we requested would be equivalent to the amount we spent last year, and the amount that was budgeted was the amount that was budgeted last year. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but this replicates what happened last year, which was us needing a budget amendment last year to meet the street lighting account. Now, the reason we've done MEA grants converting street lights to LED, and we're also in the process of doing grants now, like Eastern Shore Drive, where we're converting it to LED. So we're making efforts for cost savings on the electrical account, but yet due to expansion that we're seeing in residential areas, et cetera, we're not able to see any savings at this point. We did a parking grant in the parking garage that's virtually paid for itself, but that light's not charged to the street light account.
Okay, the couple of questions, if I could. What is the total account balance for this budget item, approximately?
The budget amount that was in there was $835,000. And that's the same budgeted amount, as I mentioned before, that was in the budget for last year.
If my math is right, or put it this way, if it's not, I'll blame it on the calculator, that's a 17% overage
What
in
I
spend.
think has happened is, last year we did the budget amendment because of the rates got raised.
Right.
So did we not add that rate increase into last year's budget?
We don't monitor the increase with the budget account in this sense. What we should have did, or what should have been done, is the same exact amount, including the adjustment, be budgeted this year. But instead, and I can't say why, it replicated the initial budget amount and not the amended budget amount. Does that make sense?
I think this was just an oversight
Yes.
on our part during the budget process.
Is this money already spent?
No, it is not. And the reason we come before you late is we were hoping that the amount would be less this year in actuality because of some of our LED conversions, but in retrospect, the amount is the same. Now, to bear some good news, not all bad news, is we're working with Delmarva Power now. They're going to convert 5% of their lights that we pay a tariff for to LED for us this year, and in turn, that savings will be reflected in our electric next year. But we're only talking 5% of the Delmarva Power lights, and so that's not that large of an amount. But we are making efforts to save electricity.
So if we did not vote in favor of this budget amendment, what kind of impact would that have on your, on the citizens, let's say that?
I think it's a great question, Mr. Council President, because I'd like to just see it happen once, just to see what they do, because if we're not going to talk about getting them back and changing state law, and we're not going to talk about speaking up when we read about rate increases, and we're not going to bring to task that nice man who's our consultant on energy, then, and I'm sorry, $145,000
Increase.
I don't know
That's
where.
a lot of money.
I mean, I could see $145 like I've done sometimes. You know what I mean?
Just so I'm clear, the amount with this increase would make our electric account total exactly the same as last year. It would not be an increase from last year. Last year,
No,
our,
that's not my problem. My problem is it wasn't budgeted.
Well, last year, we had to do a budget.
Budget.
We had to do a budget amendment.
Based
This year,
upon
we
the
have to do a
increase.
budget
based
amendment.
upon- based upon the increase.
that is correct.
And that's an issue
So
for
this is
me.
So
2
now we're
years
doing
in a
another
row
one.
that
And
we
guess
come
what,
back for a
guess what they're
budget.
gonna do next year?
Do it again,
It's gonna
Same
increase
thing.
again.
because they know we're gonna pay it, or they think we are. Yeah.
I mean, I'll volunteer to take the one outside my house off. I can't, speak for 2 houses that way or 2 houses the other way, but it would be my suggestion, Mr. Council President, because this is one of those where if I vote no, you will look down the table and go, you're turning your lights off. But
It's
it
not
would
funny.
not be a bad idea if somebody from Delmarva Power could be sitting in front of
Here.
us at some point. And I know that makes people uncomfortable because that's friends from the Chamber of Commerce and that's buddies on the Greater Salisbury Committee. And
I don't think that's the case, but I will tell
don't think
you
it makes
that,
anybody
I
uncomfortable.
think that makes a
Somebody
huge
needs to-
difference.
Not to me.
In terms of
Me either.
Not to me.
the projection of of how well the city is getting along without very little controversy. I think it has a profound, in my experience. So if one of those people could come and maybe have Mr. Anderson sitting next to them and then somebody whose street light would go off if we don't pay $145,000. I mean, this is a MML thing.
So-
I mean, Julie and I were just talking about the amount of money we pay them.
Mr. President?
one second.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor.
I don't know what this has to do with the Chamber of Commerce or Greater Salisbury
I'll tell
Committee.
you
It's
then
a,
if you'd
u-
like to know.
yeah, it's a utility, it's a utility.
There are
that
representatives on those boards and in those places that represent Delmarva Power. And maybe if some of those leaders could come and tell us why. It's never,
I mean, they're
it's never a
also,
break, it's never, it's,
Yeah.
you deal with the rolling blackouts, and I mean you, like when it happens and people call. They don't call Delmarva Power, you know who
that's
they
right, they call me.
They call us and they look and see when the power's out, when the
call
outages
me.
are online, and say, okay, well, we don't particularly want to be the whipping person anymore. Because this is not new.
But
It happened every year I was here.
But I-
have to come back and do it.
But I wouldn't say, it doesn't matter what club they belong to. We need them here. We need them here.
Yeah,
You know,
DPL.
we need Delmarva Power
Power,
here.
yes, we do.
Because the reality is, and so here's what's sad. I mean, so we're going to take, let's say we take 5%, and this is what we've been working on over the last, few weeks. You take 5%, right, of their lights in the city that they own, and it reduces the costs. Well, how much of the cost for the electricity is the cost that we pay Delmarva Power? Almost nothing, 10%. 10% of the total bill that we pay to Delmarva Power. You want to know what the 90% is? Profit. Profit. It is tariffs. It's just money that goes into that company's pockets.
Pockets.
Well, how do we get their attention on the tariff? Do we vote no this evening?
Well,
I mean, honestly, maybe, I don't know.
honestly,
Question,
I will tell you that I'm voting no
question.
ahead of time because it was painful enough last year.
We had to do it.
It's painful again this year, and it's a huge miss.
I mean, it could be,
17.3% of the total is a huge miss in business. You know what my board of directors would have done to me?
Argue.
It's not pretty. It's not pretty.
Could we do this at budget time? When there is the ability, Mr.
For the next year's budget,
For, yeah.
we
We
could
just need a
request,
drop down is what we need to do. And we need to see everything that's in and out. We don't do a whole lot of that. We don't ask Keith to, I mean, I lived through those days where there was a drop down
Well,
for
we're,
boots.
and we're
but just to see
we're
where
tearing
everything's
through
going.
all of that right
Yeah,
now
I'm
with,
sure-
with
I'm
respect
sure-
to the streetlights, because this is, now, I mean, if you look at MML and you look at, you know, US Conference of Mayors and National League of Cities, this is one of the top 3 expenditures for cities. It's, you know, it's this, and it's police, and it's fire. You know, that's what costs cities a lot of money. But I think we all recognize that. And I think we're all willing to keep lights on in our city. You know, the problem is, I think we're ending up in a position where we're spending a fortune, and it's increasing pretty rapidly.
it's crazy.
Is there any movement in the MML or with the Mayor's Association with asking them if we can buy them back? At least the poles.
Well, if we do that, we want to put, we want solar-powered streetlights.
Right?
I mean, because then that takes it completely off the grid, you're not paying anybody any money. The only cost in it is the maintenance and the bulbs, and that's,
Well, if we consider that, I hope we would do a detailed ROI.
I think the bigger, I think the bigger question with respect to the streetlights is, even if the state won't let us buy them, or excuse me, won't mandate, I think we can end up in situations where we can bypass them, or buy them if we want them, but bypass them more likely, turn them off, not pay for them, not pay Delmarva Power, replace them with our lights, and own it. I mean, again, 10%. So will it take a long time to build out the infrastructure? Absolutely. I think what we've got to explore is with, is there anyone out there who can partner with us to hold the debt associated with, because that's a big project.
Yeah, it is.
And you'd be asking for a lot of front-end cost paid off over time in the long run. And in order to pull something like that off, I don't think we can achieve that if we have to hold all that debt on our
Yeah, no,
books.
we can't. Because
Because you're talking about, we're going to spend $38 million with Delmarva Power on streetlights alone. We're going to spend $38 million over the next 28 years. Excuse me, over the next 20 years. $38 million. Let that sink in for a second.
That's
90% of which is street profit, or is not built into the rates, is not paying for electricity like you pay your home. Imagine if somebody said, you're going to increase your electric bill for your house 9-fold. Oh, are my lights going to get brighter? No. I mean, are my lights going to cure cancer? No. They're going to, where's that money going to go? In our pockets.
Do we have a contract with them? Or is this just some bill they send to us?
I don't think we have a contract. I don't know.
It would be really interesting whether or not we put on the agenda Delmarva Power contract and decided that this is what we were willing to pay based on the 90% profit, 10%, this is what it really costs you, and see if anybody shows up.
Is there an alternative?
That could be huge for municipalities across Maryland. If somebody stood up and said, instead of doing what you and I have done, sit there and go, oh, well, the legislature didn't put it on again. You know, somebody killed it, some lobbyist got to some legislature. I've been there when I've been in the room when it's happened. I would just say if we could get a copy of their bill, Mr. Council President, and take this 90% profit, you'll provide us with how you got that and everything. I mean, I'm not worried that that's not true.
They put that in the bill. They put that in our bills.
Yeah.
They show it to us, what the tariff is
And
versus.
see, this is what you're going to get. It's amazing that lights are what gets, I mean, my ears are just, oh. But if we put it on the agenda and say, we're willing to pay you at a 50% profit, because I think once it's set into here, and maybe somebody else hears it somewhere else and somebody begins to write about it, then maybe, because it is sort of like one of those things, well, what are you gonna do? It's the they.
Yeah.
You have to pay them. And for once, it's not government.
Yeah. Ms. Blake, you had a comment or question?
Yes, well, I'm really new to this process, but I had a question. So you need to purchase these lights?
No.
No,
Electrical bill.
it's an electrical bill.
It's
Yes.
For what, like, on Eastern Shore Drive?
Street lights throughout the city.
Throughout the city?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So, for the benefit of the public, if we did not move this forward, what would happen? They're going to, Delmarva Power is going to shut off our electric?
I can't speak as an authority, maybe Mr. Tillman can. Our electric bill comes as a,
I can tell you they
our
are.
electric,
You're going to
they
ask me
do
to
at
ask the
home?
attorney
tell you
about
they will.
saving the money.
You don't need a lawyer to tell us they will, they're going to.
but my concern is, if our bill's at a whole, we need electricity through Delmarva Power, not just for lights, but through other facilities as well. So in turn, if they cut off our electricity, I don't know if it's centered strictly around streetlights. You know, if they were say, you're invalid, an account holder, then that would affect more than street.
Okay, so you're saying this bill is totally just the electric?
This bill is totally just for streetlights.
For
Streetlights.
streetlights,
So do
okay.
they send a bill
Okay.
just for that, or do they send one bill?
Do
to
they
the
send separate
city
bills?
Se-
For wastewater treatment?
Separate.
plant?
Separate bills?
Separate.
Separate
Separate
bills.
bills.
All separate.
So,
So for these street
Oh,
lights,
so as
Yeah.
long as
They
we're
would
paying
put-
the other ones,
So we could do this, put it on the agenda for Monday night, and we just vote it down.
Somebody will come out on Tuesday morning, won't they?
so is this
entirely
already
possible.
billed?
I mean, that's what I said,
Yeah.
because I'm not gonna
I'm
vote.
like Jim on this, we should have somebody from EPNL come here and sit and explain this to us, and why we're paying so much of a difference. And why is it every year, for the last 2 years, that we're finding this out at the end?
Did they already invoice you for this? Is this an invoice already money spent, or is this projected money?
This
for
is the
re-
projected
This is
bill
projected
for July 1st.
July
Yes.
1st? I see.
And we should know, I mean, we should have an understanding of why, and this is happening
I'm not saying
every year.
that last year was due to a projection of increase in rate. This year was a projection that we thought that it would be less than it actually is. The rate did not increase. If the amendment goes through to, or the budget amendment, it would conclude that the electric bill this year would be exactly the same as it would be last year.
Shouldn't this have been decreasing, you know, on the basis of their installation of the LED lights? I mean, we're now
that's what
in,
was said last
what,
year.
year 4 of,
That's what it was supposed to be.
And the year before?
Yes.
And the year, yes,
but it's going the other direction.
Well,
but it's getting more expensive.
no, it's the same as
Same.
it was, but, yeah, it's going in
It's
the
more
wrong
expensive.
direction.
Yeah, it's more expensive.
So the money we spent yielded no savings, correct?
Or it did, but rates.
So are we paying for
But
the
the
Or
rates
it,
LED?
or it
didn't
did,
go
but
up.
rates
Right.
They said
went
the
up,
rates
or the
didn't go
tariff
up.
went
So
up.
if the rates didn't go up,
We're paying for the LED lights all over the city.
We also acquired new lights throughout the year.
Oh, Amanda Pollock is making the point also that in new divisions, anytime that there's development, those are DPNL lights too.
Okay.
So they're adding lights meanwhile. So anytime those lights are added, we're paying
There's an
those,
increase.
we're paying those bills too.
DP&L is adding lights, or?
Yeah,
Well, we are, but they're.
they're
They're
lights
city
in the
lights.
city.
Yeah, in the
well,
city.
to give you like a 30-second synopsis is, within the city, we have lights that the city owns, which are about half, correct, Bill? And we have lights that Delmarva Power owns that we pay a tariff for. So we're trying to improve our electric bill with lights we own by converting them to LED.
I have no problem with that.
And if I can just, and what Councilman Ireton's point is that if we were to own all of them, all of that tariff, part of the cost, the expense, would be gone.
Because even
You'd
the
still be
ones-
paying for the
even
electricity.
the ones that we don't own, that they own, no. Even the ones that we own that aren't LED, it's still electricity from
DPNL.
Yes.
Delmarva Power.
But it's so much cheaper.
It's-
You're just paying for the electricity.
Right.
You're just paying for the electricity, which is 10% of
All
the,
that we have to go.
exactly.
So we're
We have to
we're
install and
renting
we have to
from-
maintain.
How do you want to do this? Would you prefer
Here's-
that I
I'm not
make a
sure.
motion to table?
Here's my issue. I can remember sitting here last year, if you remember, and we had the same kind of discussion. And I was upset about the fact that we had, and I said, okay, I can understand because it's the first, well, not the first year, but I'm willing to, and if I remember correctly, the percentage was pretty close. It was double digits, I know, over what the
It was like 12%.
what the actual was. This is 17.3, which is higher than that in terms of a
And
miss.
So you're not telling me that we expanded our footprint of lights by an additional 17%? So we've gone in and done.
We can find out exactly how many.
We've gone in
Yeah.
and done cost savings thing by putting in LEDs. We've added some lights, but it shouldn't be as,
Well, to give you a cost savings, I'm sorry if it's simplistic, I'm sorry, but if it's, to give you a cost savings, we did about 120 lights. We've converted to LED. We pay approximately $40, this is round numbers, we pay approximately $40 a month before, and it dropped all the way to 10. So that's a great savings for us. We pay, and that's round numbers. But if you take the $30 savings only by 130 lights, you're looking for a savings that's minuscule, 12 months, $30 a month, so you're looking at $3,600. I'm sorry for my math, it's off the top of
No,
my
it's
head.
okay. No,
So $3,600, and then you're times 130 lights.
And then you add new DP&L lights that are tariffed elsewhere in the city at the same time, and
Any lights that added in a subdivision, it must be metered. So we're not adding any tariff lights.
Okay.
But we're adding lights through subdivisions. Now, we only pay for the amount of electric used that goes to the electric meter. But to expect to see a huge amount of savings out of 130 lights, it would be difficult.
no, I think that
You know,
my,
you're looking about $3,000 savings on that 100.
my point is really that, you know, when you're in a recession and nothing's happening, things are pretty straight, budgets are fairly easy, straightforward, because you have history, et cetera. We're not in that time anymore. We may get there at some point in time, but we're not there now. And my concern is that it appears like it wasn't zero-based budgeting, in my mind. We didn't say, what's it actually going to cost us this year? I think we took numbers from last year, we looked at them, we made adjustments, instead of saying, what's the actual cost going to be? Which is a lot more work. I will tell you, I know I've been there. But to have a 17.3%, my question is the following. What if we do not support this? What is the impact on our public?
If the electric bill does not get paid, I'm presuming that the lights would be turned off.
The streetlights?
Correct.
That it takes them to fix them when they do go off? I mean, I don't mean to sound trite, or there's another couple words I could use, but is it gonna be longer than how long it normally takes us to get them to turn back on after we give them the number off the pole? I think we need to get their attention somehow, and we need to
Well,
figure out
and
how
that's
to do
what, I'm trying to get to that point, but I'm trying to do it without impacting the public.
Yeah,
Either safety,
Yeah.
you know, this is one of those where it just fries me that,
I mean, the
you know, the mayor
objective,
alluded to it. Yeah, this is what you got. Send us the bill.
the objective is, if I understand you correctly, if I understand the sort of direction the council's talking about, is to not pay, and to end up in a conversation about where we go from here?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's not the worst position in the world to be in, because we are trying to rethink, you know, Bill and Billy and Amanda and Will and Carl and John and GIS have been working and Keith have been working to talk about, this planning, long-term planning, but there's no time like the present to end up in a position where we need to discuss it. Because, like I said, I don't think any of us can sit here and come up with a justification for why we should, over the next 20 years, spend $38 million, most of it, which is just a fee, and not going to actually pay for electricity for streetlights, rather than take that same amount of money and invest it in brand-new lights, where we're actually paying for the lights and the electricity, the actual electricity costs associated with it.
And that's it, just the electricity.
I mean, sure, let's.
The question really is, do we bring this to the meeting, have consensus to put it on the agenda and then vote it down?
Or do you want to
Or do we
refuse to even
just,
send it?
just
and
say, look,
that's it. And
Yeah.
we call.
you called
EP&L
them over
tomorrow
power and
and
said,
say,
hey, the council
"We got a
just,
problem."
the council just said,
Manages to send somebody every year.
Yeah,
to tell us what's
Yeah.
going on.
Have we ever,
and I think that we should, personally, since we're responsible for this side of it, we should say to them, you know what? We're not gonna pay it. So come in and tell us, and let's have a discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
Delmarva Power has a government representative, John Petito, that could come speak before you if requested, I'm sure.
I think that would be a great idea. So can,
Could they break it down?
Yeah, because what you're gonna hear is, well, we have the poles, and we
Yeah,
have to
break
pay
it
for the
down.
trucks to go out,
That's
and we have
right.
to pay for the people that are on the line and the rest of it, but if it's 90%, and we say, this is our number over the next 20 years, shaming is bad nowadays, apparently, as I learned at lunch the other day. But maybe we could shame them into a better
well,
deal.
I think it's when all else fails, and there's no hearing our, nobody's watching this. None of the guys from Delmarva Power are watching this.
You mean this isn't how they get their Monday evening entertainment?
No, no.
has the council
So
ever,
here's the
That's how we get
question.
ours.
The question is, do we do it in public session and vote it down?
I mean, you are in public session.
No, I mean, in a council meeting.
Yeah. I think it has the same effect either way. whatever
Either
you
way.
decide.
Okay. I would say we're not moving this forward until we get Delmarva Power to come in
Got it.
and talk to us.
Yes.
We will be prepared, if it's okay with you, at the same time and they can leave the room or stick around and hear it, but we'll be prepared to present what the capital costs, operations and maintenance costs, which I think we have a per unit
Yeah, break it down.
idea of what it would cost to replace every Delmarva Power light with a
Just
city
for the
light.
light, just in the light portion of it.
We even have a prioritization, so what it would be in the main corridors, what it would be, in where it's a higher pole, and then what it would be if you went down into every single neighborhood. So we've got all that, and you can modify it by foot candle. So if you say, what's the acceptable minimum foot candle at any point in the city? If it's 1/10 of a foot candle, it's
So
foot candle.
it's
a
like
unit of
it's better than
measure
the lumen.
of
And make
light.
sure the public shows up.
Right? See, I'm not crazy. Look at me like
And
I'm
make sure the
crazy.
public shows up,
Yeah.
so they can speak on behalf.
And if it's a tenth, you're
It's
potentially
them
spreading them a little further apart. If you
Right.
get a half a foot candle, you're gonna
Right.
put them real close together. And you will have the dark sky advocates here. If you
Yep.
try to go at half a foot
Yep.
candle or higher, I guarantee you. And we've actually got legislation written for dark sky policy as well, if we want to adopt that at the same time.
Okay, and Jack, make sure that the public is
can be here
very
for all.
much aware of this, so the public can be here to speak on behalf of, because they're the ones who's gonna be affected.
I have two things I want to ask. One, has the council ever asked Delmarva Power to come before and discuss their bill? Ever?
Not
No,
since
we
I've
have
been,
asked the gentleman who is our consultant on electricity to come and explain that bill. Never.
Okay.
And I would suggest that he be present
Yeah.
as well.
Because he always has a way of talking.
You-
He's your
You think
consultant.
if
I'll
you get
have-
Tito and John and Mr. Anderson in the same room, and it doesn't come back that it's our fault, and they're good, Billy, they're good at what they do.
Last time he brought back, he had,
Well, yeah, we
he
did
had
bring
his
some back
supervisor.
last time.
The other question I had, is there any other provider besides Delmarva Power? Is there
No.
anybody else in this area?
Chop
we-
tank.
I
Chop
mean,
tank.
we annexed them.
We have a couple small chop tank
Yeah,
accounts.
chop tank.
They're small.
Yep, they're small. They can't
Um,
compete.
It's regional.
I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
I mean, I would just wonder what it would be like to have a compare and contrast of what they would charge, to have a comparison.
But they would also have to buy all of the
Yeah, they
streetlights
would
from
have to.
Delmarva
And
Power.
that's
And
costly.
they're not, and they
And
don't
that's
have
costly.
they don't have the scope to do that.
But it's also a co-op, Chop Tank Electric. The
All
other
right.
thing is, and something to put in and look at, to at least get a, or like Jack said, an ROI on it, is converting some of the streetlights to solar power. Because then you're not, it's just less on the grid and smaller bill.
Couldn't we ask for a rebate from them after that? Isn't that what they do for people who put them on their houses?
Well, it's if you're putting electricity back on the grid, but these would be completely independent.
Huge ones.
This is serious.
Okay, do we have consensus not to move this forward?
Yes.
There's the one I've never done.
Yes.
We have a consensus not
Not
to move
to.
this forward, and instead encourage strongly to have a meeting with Delmarva Power to try to figure out what they're going to do for us,
And what are they gonna do for the city?
okay? Yeah, well, when I say us, I mean the city, not for me, personally.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're okay on that one then. Ms. Nichols, we are all clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I mean, Bill.
I would say thank you, but
When you go home, you can thank Tom for sending me.
That's why he's not here.
He knew.
Thank you, guys.
He knew, he goes, budget amendment, Jack, oop, not good. All right. Good discussion. Next up, budget amendment. This is a little bit different, though. To appropriate funds received from Whitmer Public Safety Group to repair moisture barrier. Who's presenting this one? Chief. Oh, Chief, you sure you want to come up? Says budget amendment.
The lights might go out.
We should have had you go first, maybe.
No, it's fine.
How are you today, Chief?
I'm well, how are you?
Good.
Good. Excellent.
You got a problem with moisture?
We do. And I think it was last year, we had a similar problem where we actually had encroachment. We had water seepage over a couple of years. And it actually caused mold in our records department, where we keep a lot of boxed items, documents, things like that. So we were able to repair that, which involved clearing out the side of the building on the outside, where we found that the moisture barrier that had been installed when the building was constructed had been compromised. So that was repaired, and they put in some, they also installed a way to draw the water off of the building itself a little more efficiently, and then we made some repairs, I think, to the guttering on the roof line as well, and we haven't had a problem since. And what we've noticed is that we have a similar moisture barrier on the other side of the building.
Which side would that be? Low,
That
the low
that
side?
would be the west side of the building.
The west side,
Yeah.
the high side. It's got, I
On-
think there's a height differential between the,
A little bit, on the Delaware Avenue
Yeah.
side.
yeah.
It's a similar moisture barrier, which if you drive by on Delaware Avenue, you can see it. It extends approximately maybe 1.5 to 2 feet above grade, and it too is starting to peel away. We just haven't noticed the moisture yet building up inside. So we would like to take the money that we have for turning in some of our used weapons and add that to the building and maintenance fund and then make the repair. It's more of a preventative than it is anything else, but I'd like to be able to get that done.
Do you have you had to put dehumidifiers inside the,
With the first round, yes, we did. We had carpets cleaned, we'd have everything disinfected. We took measures to mitigate the mold, and we don't want to get to that phase again. Right now, we don't have it.
okay. Questions? Any issues with it?
Not at all.
Just wish the Public Works Department could sell guns in order to pay.
Wait a minute.
It's time you surplus something, you gotta come back and put it in the electricity.
All right, do we have consent, we have consensus then?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We're through,
Okay.
budget amendment for street resurfacing, and concrete repair. First words, budget
But
amendment.
it's the good kind
It's
of
the
budget
good kind of
amendment.
budget
That's right.
amendment.
To be clear.
These I like.
So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So this is a budget amendment because we received state aid money from MDOT for street resurfacing projects that we've done this year. So this is an annual program that they have where we get approximately $47,000 a year, and we had had some money build up over a few years. So we just made a reimbursement request, and we have received already this check for $123,864 and change. We have another request going out to them very shortly for $90,000, but that may, you may see me in a couple months, and then we'll be pretty well caught up with what was in the backlog of what we've had for previous years. But they give us an amount that's based on our lane miles of roads. That's how they come up with that amount. So this is separate from highway user revenues.
That was my question. This is in addition to highway
This is
user
in
revenues.
addition to that, and this is based on, so we have to apply for specific roads that we have repaved. We do a little environmental assessment and show them our canceled checks and our invoices that we have actually paved these roads, and then they'll provide a reimbursement.
It's nice.
Yes, it's a great program.
What
And
roads did we submit to them on this?
that one I'll defer to Will.
We submitted this year's CIP paving list, so Northwood, South Park Drive, North Park Drive, Beaver Dam, some of which have already been completed and others that are scheduled coming with South Boulevard College.
Yeah.
Thank you for the one on North Park Drive, and
Yes.
this as far as it is right now. It'll go further, but
Yeah.
once you got to that one after going the length of it, coming from up north, and you get to that last part that you just did, it was very hard to keep up.
We can't go further because it gets out of the city there.
I know, because in and out again. yeah.
But the South Park Drive portion is gonna get done here soon.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's
So,
good.
North Park was like the number one question I was always, or,
North,
not North Park, Northwood Drive.
Northwood
Yes.
Drive.
Was number one.
Northwood Drive, it was like a slalom course. Just, you could,
Does it go where we finished? Is that where it goes back into the county?
Yeah, I believe.
North Park Drive?
Northwood.
Northwood.
Or
North Park.
Northwood, no. So we actually have the other portion is scheduled. The concrete contractor is actually making the curb and gutter improvements. When he's done, we'll be able to pay the remainder.
That's great.
is it up to, it didn't go as far as Downs yet, right?
Negative.
It's before that.
It was
So
split
that
into
was-
two zones, like
Got
it
it.
was Northwood 1, Northwood 2. and
Right.
then- But both got funded in the same year.
Correct. We paid from, I believe it's either Alexander or Arlington, just south of Columbia Drive,
Yeah.
to just south of Gordy Road, where the concrete contractor had
Right.
reached. Now the next section will be from Gordy to Kyle Drive.
Good. Excellent. Consensus to accept the money?
Yes.
Wait, are you sure? I mean, what we could do instead of doing additional paving with
Pay
this,
the lights?
you could write a check to Delmarva Power.
You know what? You took the words right out of my mouth. I just thought the same thing for real. Take that
part-
money and
I'm
reimburse,
kind
give them the
of,
money.
I'm kind of joking, but
No, it was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke.
We are recommending to put it back in the street maintenance. I should have said that before.
I still want to talk to them, so that's, we have
Yeah,
to
for
get their
real, we
attention,
should.
so.
But I was thinking that, I was like,
Okay,
I don't
we
want to
got
say it.
consensus on that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Don't move, though.
Yes, I'm
All right, Riverwalk Construction Reimbursement Program.
So I'm here as a follow-up from our discussion at the February 19th work session where we talked initially about this Riverwalk reinvestment program, or reimbursement program, I'm sorry, for construction of the Riverwalk. There were a few unanswered questions from that work session, so I want to start with those.
Okay.
Mark Tillman has weighed in and made some additions to the ordinance. So on the ordinance itself, if I can point you to lines 61 and 62.
Let me get there, hold on a second.
Sure. We noted that upon completion of the Riverwalk, the owners of those properties would have to convey the title of the completed Riverwalk to the city of Salisbury. So that was one thing that was not in it before, but we wanted to make it clear that the city wanted to own the Riverwalk. The other item are lines 64 through 66. The question came up as to if the land changed hands, would the program continue?
Right.
And so the way this is phrased, and Mark can probably expand on it some, is that this reimbursement is payable to the then current owners of the land adjoining each Riverwalk construction project. So it's really only applicable to the person who owns the project.
The original
The
project.
original owner. So those were the two changes
Yep,
since
that's
last
good.
time. Yes.
Questions?
So I want to walk myself through it. It's a tax abatement for up to 20 years for new construction, as long as it's on the Riverwalk.
So we are reimbursing just for the construction of the Riverwalk itself. If you're in the area that was designated in our code to have a public Riverwalk in it. And we're funding, let me make sure I'm saying all this right, 75% of their costs of the Riverwalk construction. So we're cost sharing in it.
So it's essentially a way to bond, I mean, think about it as an alternative to bonding if the city, because the city's gonna own it, it's city infrastructure, we're just making developers put it in, but, you know, developers are basically saying, well, okay, it just kills projects, so we're just not gonna develop it. And, so the alternative is, okay, from the increase in property values and from the increased revenues associated, some portion of that can pay us back for, or pay you back for the Riverwalk. Now, we still get to own it, but you pay for it up front, Mr. or Mrs. Developer, and you will receive some portion of that back through those increased revenues to the city, a portion of the increased revenues to the city.
And that was capped at 90% of the incremental increase in city property taxes. They could not get more than that.
So we'd still get the base plus 10% for those years that they would get reimbursement.
Can you do me a favor and just pick a spot? I don't know, wherever you want.
500 Riverside.
No, because that's a boatload of bulkheading. If you're gonna do a commercial,
There's
I'm
only,
trying to figure out how much,
there's only like 3 areas. It's the North Prong, a portion of which is intended for, you know, park, but a portion of which could be privately developed. There's 500 Riverside, and there's Lot 30. All of downtown, we already own, it already has, or all of the sort of old town portion of downtown. We already own that Riverwalk. So the only vacant spots are the North Prong, you know, especially the whole east side of the North Prong, the Lot 30, and 500 Riverside. I think that's pretty much it.
I understand because the bulkheading is a big cost, but if a building goes in downtown and they come to us to the EDUs and they get the state tax credits through the enterprise zone, I'm just wondering
They'd
if,
have to give that up essentially to do this. They kind of would have to pick, because the enterprise zone reduces the amount of taxes they owe.
Okay.
So they kind of have to pick, or they have to just accept that
percent.
they're only gonna be get paid back a little bit. So like even a big development like 500 Riverside, I think the first couple of years, if they elected the enterprise zone, which I think you all have already approved their enterprise zone credits, they only get like $4,000 back maximum if they build out all of their whole project. I mean, so they're not getting a lot back, but it's something. And in the years after their enterprise zone credits go away, or, that enterprise zone cap goes away,
Is
then,
that because
then.
they're not employing a whole boatload of people? That's why it's smaller?
It's just because the property's not valued at very much right now.
Right.
So, it's just that if they elect the enterprise zone credit, it drops what they owe. So what's reimbursable to us, and we're still capping that at 90%, because we're saying, and only 75% of their expenses. So we're saying essentially that you'd have this
the delta.
sliver of the delta.
Right.
And it would go up in the last couple of years of the program. So, if you cap this out, which I think it's capped out at 20 years, we'd be reimbursing them most of that in the last, in year 11 through year 20. That's when the bulk of it would happen. Years 1 through 10, they're not paying much taxes anyway. So we're not going to get those taxes anyway, but we would be offering that little sliver back to pay for the Riverwalk, and then we get to own it. Or, one way to do this, a totally different way, is to not have this program and just to put it in the CIP and build the Riverwalk and to accept responsibility for it. But then you got to finance it. We have to finance it,
Yeah.
not a developer.
Yeah.
And thus far, we've said we want the developers to be responsible for building it and financing it.
Right.
Just hasn't happened yet.
Is that what they're doing on 500 Riverside?
They are building it.
They're gonna build it themselves?
We have put that as a requirement for them.
Yep.
And what is that, a square, not a square foot, but a square
Square
yard? Not even that, the length.
Well, they have
Per foot.
bulkhead improvements they have to do too. So I actually haven't seen their full cost estimate yet, because that'll be part of the bond that we get. So they have significant bulkhead work to do before they can actually put that in, so, and fill
And so,
behind it.
And we've not, we've excluded bulkhead.
We have.
from
Yeah, we
this.
made this very specific, and we've excluded landscaping. This is really just
Because we don't
for
get
the
to own their
Riverwalk.
bulkhead.
And I do want to note that we have in here that funds have to be appropriated each year. So you would see this at budget time. I would be making a specific request in the budget each year for this.
how much do you anticipate
Well,
next year putting in?
None, because there won't be one that's complete. So this is not until it's absolutely complete and ready to get turned over to us, then they would start their program. And so it's very clear, this is reimbursement. We are not front
front money.
paying for this or anything else. This is when it's complete, we're accepting it, then we'll start the program. So,
And the money, we don't have any idea or way of guessing, we have a way of guessing, but we don't have any idea what their property will be valued at. So, I mean, it's only also reimbursable as they pay. So they gotta pay their city property taxes and then they get that portion, that remainder back. But that's the only way. Now, one question worth asking, and because this didn't come up earlier, and either Amanda or Mark, would we insist on fee simple owning up front? Like, we'd get the deed figured out on the front end of that?
we had said that they would turn it over to us once it's complete.
It says in there.
Yeah,
complete.
subject to property, convey the title upon the completed Riverwalk,
Right.
which is probably what's best for us too, in the event that they don't complete it. We wouldn't want to own some piece
Yeah.
of incomplete Riverwalks.
All I was thinking is, no matter how the program works, you want to own it. The city
Yes.
should
Oh,
own it
yeah.
no matter
Yeah,
what.
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions? Consensus? Okay,
Okay, thank
that's
you.
the last one there. Last item is Vision Zero presentation.
Okay, so I'd like to invite Will White back up, and I should have introduced him last time, for
I was
those who
gonna,
don't
I
know.
was gonna
Yes.
suggest to those at home.
Yes. So this is Will White. He's our transportation project specialist for the city. And we want to just introduce the concept today of Vision Zero and talk a little bit about what it means for Salisbury. You may have read some articles. It's being discussed in the news a lot recently. And it's really an overall systematic program to have safer streets and to really prioritize the safety of pedestrians and cyclists over speed and throughput and getting cars through faster. So we'll develop this presentation. I'm going to let him run through this, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
So what is Vision Zero? It's not new. It's actually been around since the 90s. The Swedes actually developed it in the late 80s, started doing test projects, and then pushed it into full gear in about 1995, 1996. It has gained momentum across Europe. If you've ever been to Europe, you've actually seen its engineering practices in play and just probably haven't realized it. Most major cities from Paris to Budapest to London are all using Vision Zero. And it is the standard practice of most European DOTs, so meaning like every street, road nationwide in Europe is done on a Vision Zero engineering standard. Currently, in the U.S., about 40,000 people die on American streets each year. The vast majority of those are actually pedestrians and cyclists. They're often referred to as accidents, but they're actually entirely preventable. Very rarely is an accident truly an accident. If you take proactive, preventative approaches to traffic safety, we can prevent most of these tragedies. Because pedestrians and cyclists fear for safety on streets, there's really no true freedom of mobility. Vision Zero holds 4 core beliefs. People make mistakes. Mistakes should not be fatal. Acknowledges that speed is the #1 factor in death or injury versus survival. Relies on the engineering concept of systemic safety, which places the responsibility of the safety on the system as a whole rather than individuals who can fail. And it encourages the formation of multidisciplinary teams. So it's not just engineering going out there and setting new curb lines, or the police on their own trying to enforce traffic laws on a street that, clearly says do 50 miles per hour, but the speed limit's only 35. Okay, so why does Vision Zero focus on speed? You can see the chart here. So at 20 miles per hour, a pedestrian struck by a car has about a 90% chance of survival. At 40 miles per hour, it's 20. So as speed increases, dramatically, the chance of survival increases, or decreases, rather. 42 cities in the United States have adopted Vision Zero. It's actually up from when I made this presentation. It was 38 just a few weeks ago. In the last couple weeks, Jersey City and a few others, including Fremont in California, which is the closest analog to our size, have come on board. We're not the only ones in the state doing this. So MDOT and MHSO, so that's Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Highway Safety Office, which is actually a division of Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, has asked each county to create a strategic highway safety plan that moves towards the state's goal of called Towards Zero Deaths, is their program. We've reached out to county, nothing so far. Salisbury has a vital interest in pedestrian and cyclist safety, but it also needs to allow for a large number of daily commuters who work and shop but do not live in the city. So we have to compensate for everything. And we have a growing bike and pedestrian networks, and this is incompatible with the high-speed highways, arterials, and collectors that are currently dominating a lot of our transportation network. Montgomery County has actually full-blown adopted Vision Zero. Okay. How does this fit in with our city plans? So we've already, due to the bike lanes and the pedestrian infrastructure that we're increasing at lightning pace, we are already mandating a lot of these speed reduction and traffic calming techniques. It prioritizes the prevention of crashes rather than the cleanup of them. So preventing the crash with separating out modes of traffic with bike lanes and sidewalks, and then slowing traffic with speed humps, bulb outs, and other such things like you see on Main Street. Some crashes will be inevitable, and our Vision Zero uses restrictive design to ensure that crashes are not fatal. So there will be places where we will have crashes, but in that case, we'll mediate and reduce their seriousness. It prioritizes pedestrians and cyclists, especially in low to moderate income areas. It's part of the ethical values of Vision Zero. There are a standard set of engineering practice that use Vision Zero, and these are the NACTO guidelines. They are actually formed by a coalition of 38 major cities in the US and Canada. They're publicly available. It's not something that we're just coming up with. Everything that we've done and that you'll see pictures of soon is in the NACTO guidelines. It is time-tested and data-supported. Sweden, since they adopted this in 1995, full adoption of this in 1995, 1996, they have doubled the number of cars on their transportation network and cut their number of fatals and serious collisions in half. So how can we become a Vision Zero city? We put forward the ordinance that specifically defines the following. It's a clear goal to set a timeline to achieve zero fatalities or serious injuries by January 1st, 2030. Clearly delineate members of a committee to oversee it. Mandate the formation of an action plan with yearly reports made to council. Mandate engineering and design changes, including our design guidelines. Stepped up police enforcement and education and outreach. And we reduce and better manage our speeds citywide. And now we go to serious examples everyone might have noticed in the city in the recent weeks. So what you're seeing here is actually a snapshot of South Park Drive approaching Snow Hill Road. This is North Division Street and High Street. And what we did here is we removed a high-speed free right turn that was a leftover of when North Division was Route 13 that allowed them to cut through to 50. It was essentially an off-ramp. It's now gone. Turn radii have been reduced to slow down turning traffic at that intersection. Bulb outs have been added. The city and county employees that have to cross this intersection are thrilled over this.
You'll see a common theme of eliminating these free right turns where, exactly, I mean, that's just a high-speed right turn where people are not stopping to look at
Monte
pedestrians.
Carlo.
This is another shot of South Park Drive and Snow Hill Road. Again, we removed a free right turn, reduced the turn radii, put in a bulb out, and we added in a connection to the future bikeway coming off Carroll Avenue that would connect to the urban greenway along the river.
And so don't forget to say it, another side benefit of these projects is we are greatly reducing our impervious area. If you look at the aerials, which are all the befores, it's a large expanse of impervious area. And so we're reducing that, turning that pavement back into green space while we're making these intersections safer.
In this one alone, I think we removed approximately 7,000 square feet. Sheffield Avenue, again, you can see a series of free right turns, both coming off of South Park going on to Sheffield and then coming off of Sheffield going on to South Park Drive. We removed all that, narrowed it up. It's now a standard 90-degree intersection, has improved visibility. The two residents that actually lived that were directly affected about it have raved about how happy they are. They have had serious problems pulling out of their driveways and cars zinging around the corner and narrowly missing crashes in the past. North Park Drive and Memorial Plaza, it was the same thing. We removed another free right turn going down Memorial Plaza where there's a lot of joggers and cyclists and children crossing to the zoo. We narrowed the lanes. They were at 15. We took them down to 13 and then added bulb outs. Hannibal Lane at Beaglin Drive, this one's still under some construction. And this picture was taken early in the process, but it's essentially it was the city's largest free right turn. We have taken it down to a right in, right out. So it's still technically a free right coming off Beaglin, but it's now a greatly reduced in geometry, so they have to slow down. And we've set the pedestrian and bike crossing about 50 feet from it so that there's time for the car to come in off Beaglin, realize that there's a pedestrian in their path, and then yield.
Could you just go over that one again?
Yep. So if you look in the aerial coming south in that photo, so from top to bottom,
Yeah.
you'll see the free right turn.
Yeah.
So that has been entirely removed.
Right.
And then you'll see where it was a left in and right out at one point.
Right.
And then we had taken it to just one way out years ago for safety purposes. Most of that's also been removed, and we've placed in a right in, right out. So traffic can still come in and out there. It's just now the geometry has been changed, so they have to do it at a much slower speed.
Gotcha.
It was a right in, right out, but
Right.
now it's
It's
a
a-
much more
it's a much-
condensed.
Correct.
So none of these changes is a full implementation of Vision Zero, but it's showing you a tiny glimpse of what you'll start seeing throughout the city with an adoption of this, and then a more coordinated effort, as Will said, with other departments, and really getting police and fire and planning and engineering and everybody on board. I did want to note also in your packages, we received support letters from both the local
yeah.
State Highway Administration Office as well as the Highway Safety Office from State Highway. So with State Highways, vision, or towards zero deaths, yes, towards zero deaths promotion, this fits right in with that. So they had our support.
Is this what was done on Delaware Avenue and Booth Street?
Yes, ma'am.
What does it cost to do one of these, and where did that come out of the budget?
It varies largely in size. The price is going to vary based on how large it is. For example, North Street in High Division, or North Division in High Street, for example, was approximately 35 to 40,000, and it came out of streets or bike master plan implementation. If there's a bike route, it's being done in conjunction with a bike route, that money is eligible.
But otherwise out of the street maintenance program.
Well, this is similar to what was done last year on, at Decatur Avenue and what is now Knock Way, where you had people coming off the highway.
Exactly.
Correct.
Cut
40,
through.
50 miles an hour, not even stopping at the stop
Yes.
sign.
Yeah.
for
I
souls.
did stop.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly. So just trying to eliminate all of those occurrences from happening makes a driver more aware there's a pedestrian.
So, going to this, if we get down into it, so is the goal on some of our city streets to reduce the speed to 20 miles per hour? Is that one?
Yes, so essentially, I wanted to just
Especially when
introduce
they're
this today
turns.
and get your feedback, and I didn't bring any legislation with me today because I wanted to have the discussion. But there's 4 different ordinances that we see necessary, or we can combine it all into one. But one is to adopt this philosophy, adopt Vision Zero and set a target date, which we were anticipating being 2030. Another would be to establish the steering committee. Who makes up this committee? How often would they meet? You know, who would actually be our partners? The next is to reduce speed limits. So we would look at reducing speed limits citywide because that is the prime factor in crash severity. And then the final one would be to eliminate those right turns on red and free right turns. And then-
Yeah, because, you know, I had spoke to the mayor earlier this year or last year about it being done on Delaware Avenue, and a lot of people didn't understand. They were like, I can't turn. I said, well, I know you can if you're going 40 or 50 miles per hour. You won't be able to turn, and that's the whole purpose of it, to slow, you know, have a slower rate, because there is a playground right there, and there are homes in that area, so, yeah.
So it's just like Hannibal Lane here, where it doesn't restrict, I mean, cars can do the same thing they could do before, but now they're having to do it at a much slower
Slower
pace.
pace,
It's
yeah.
narrower lanes, you know, it's just, it's making that eye towards the fact that there is a bike path that crosses and pedestrians walk there.
So a couple of questions I have. One, which you alluded to, there would be metrics that we would have on a yearly, I assume those are the ones on the yearly report?
Yes, sir.
And they would have to be identified. One of the thoughts I had was GIS could probably play a great role in that.
Yes, definitely.
Now that we've got, where are we on that, by the way? Are we,
Oh, yeah, you want to check out, if you don't check it out regularly, you go to salisbury.md and go to Citizen Services at the top, and then all the way on the right, top right corner, you'll find Access Public Mapping Data and Tools.
so, okay.
And
so
there
it's
are,
on there.
it's populated with a bunch of different maps, so I mean, whatever you want to see. And we can add more. I mean, we've got lots of viewers that, I mean, basically any data set that can be mapped, we can make
That's
it
why I'm
publicly
saying,
accessible.
this would be a
There's a lot.
really good tool for this.
Yes, and they have mapped our bike lanes. They can certainly overlay crash data, but we could highlight these intersections as well.
And then for future, I would assume that this would be part of the planning process for new developments and things.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's part of why
So
we
the
would want to adopt
review,
it.
it's got, it's, because
Yes.
if it was in the code,
Exactly, then they have to do it.
then they have to do it.
And then we are going to update our standards and our standard specifications accordingly.
Yeah, the reality is, making changes to old intersections piecemeal, slowly, within our existing budget is exactly that, it's piecemeal. You know, it's not comprehensive like
Right.
legislation would be, that would
Right.
say, this is the standard, meet it, period.
Right. And sort of, this is totally unrelated, well, it's not totally unrelated, but the technology that's used at 5 Points on the light changes,
The cameras there, yeah.
because I'm thinking relative to no turn on red, if you had that kind of technology, is that expensive?
To put cameras in?
No,
Or-
the technology that judge and says, hey, there's nobody coming here, but there's 4 guys.
It's called adaptive signal technology, and depending on how many cameras, how many points are coming, you're typically talking $20,000 to $50,000 for the cameras alone per intersection.
Okay, well, that was a,
That's why traffic circles in locations like that are cheaper than putting in lights.
The other thing is, because we have our traffic safety committee, and that's, which I'm supposed to be on that committee, and I think
they meet as needed.
which is, since I've been on the council, we've never met.
I don't think they've had a quorum for some time, so.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, but
And,
this
and
is-
maybe another thing, and this is just if we do, when we go through with this and we build a steering committee, is to repurpose that committee. And then I think the other piece with committees as like an addendum to that is to maybe have some requirement for these as-needed committees to meet at least once a year. Anyway, even if there's nothing on the agenda, just to make sure we meet and because sometimes, like I said, this one is, we've never met.
And
We
BPAC
talked
and
one time
BPAC
on the
meets
phone.
all the time.
Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah,
have some that
PPAC
are very
meets all the
active
time,
and
very
fully
active.
staffed
And one of you asked the question, if you remember when we did the boards and commissions redesign, and I can't remember who, but somebody said, do we still need both of those? And our reaction to the time, I think, and I don't remember who said it, but somebody's reaction, whether it was mine or somebody else's, was, well, maybe, I mean, they could deal with different things and, you know, but the reality is, since BPAC was created, traffic
Yeah.
and safety
And
was not really
Might be
used,
best
but-
to just,
or create a working group, a subgroup of BPAC
With a
that's focused on
representative,
this,
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, so what a lot of cities, if you look at how most cities are set up with Vision Zero, especially in the US, they actually create what's called a Vision Zero Alliance, which is like a citizen-led group where they combine those. So it's, BPAC would still meet, traffic and safety would still meet, the Salisbury Running Club would still do their thing, but they would all have their own Vision Zero Alliance meetings that they go to and then come to ours.
Yeah.
So they could send a representative, that way it's manageable for us, rather than having to attend.
Good. Any other thoughts, questions? Support, move forward?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, can
We'll
I,
prepare
can I add one thing about State Highway?
Sure.
I know they sent a letter of support, but last week, the administrator of State Highway was in town, and I learned some things that they're doing on corridors you might not think, like major state arterials. They're reducing the lane widths to 10 feet. They're reducing speed. They actually reduced the lane widths on the Severn River Bridge to 10 feet, for example. Yeah, real narrow.
I go faster over that than I do on Division Street.
And they're even adding, now throughout the Purple Line corridor, they're adding crosswalks that are painted to look like they're three-dimensional. So where the Purple Line is going, all across, and you've probably seen them online, but
Guys jamming on their brakes? thinking-
Yes.
yeah, that's the idea, is get people to slow down as they approach those, is it's supposed to play a trick on your eye. And in Europe, they have them. Apparently they work. Just thought I'd share that because, you know, State Highway doesn't always get the reputation of being, you know,
The good
the
guys.
leader on these things and
Yeah,
progressive.
progressive.
But I
Not the
think
most
in this case, they kind of are.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else to the order? Okay. If not, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.